I used to think life could be engineered like a spreadsheet, line items aligned, balances reconciled, nothing left to chance. My name is Daniel Reed, 33, senior accountant for a mid-sized firm that trusted me with the sort of ledgers that kept executives sleeping at night. Numbers behave when you treat them right. They follow rules. People don't. I learned that the hard way. For years back, I stood under a church's archwood ceiling and promised a life to a woman I could hardly believe had chosen me. Olivia Hartman was 25 then, with light gold hair that caught daylight like it was something she owned and a smile that could turn an ordinary errand into a small celebration. We weren't naive about what we wanted. We laid it out simply. I would be the constant, the one who showed up, paid the bills, stacked the savings, wrestled with taxes and insurance, and all the adult chores that promised stability. She would make our place into more than a roof and walls. She had an eye for color and softness and the kinds of details guests comment on without knowing why they're commenting. It sounded old-fashioned to some, I'm sure. It suited us just fine. We bought, or rather, I bought, the 3-bedroom in Maple Ridge before the wedding. It was the smart move then, good interest rate, solid neighborhood, decent schools if we ever needed them. Title in my name, mortgage too. Not because I intended to put her on a leash. I just handled those things. She had a card on my account and a monthly stipend to use for the house or for herself. Lunch with friends whenever she wanted. A reliable compact SUV I'd placed the keys to in her palm 2 summers prior. I was proud every time she pulled into the driveway in it, smiling at some bit of good news that rarely had anything to do with me and everything to do with a life taking shape. For the first 3 years, we moved in a rhythm I didn't question. I'd come home to the scent of onion and garlic rolling out of the kitchen, to music drifting low, to Olivia appearing in the hallway with a look that made exhaustion unclench its fist from my day. We talked about what was ahead, whether the second bedroom would be a nursery or a study a little longer, whether we'd drive to the coast in the fall or just stay home and build a fire, which of my colleagues she actually liked and which she merely tolerated when we hosted. She had a gift for the ritual of hospitality. She made people feel chosen and heard, and they left with the impression I'd made the smart choice both in marriage and in life. I didn't think of myself as blind. I thought of myself as fortunate. 6 months ago, something subtle shifted, a clock resetting by a second you couldn't detect unless you watched the hands a long time. At first, it was easy to dismiss. Olivia's once-a-week jaunts grew ambitious. Every day, there was somewhere to be. She'd finish breakfast, dab her lips with a napkin, then vanish with the breezy promise of just a few errands, and return as the afternoon slouched toward evening. She came through the door with a shopping bag or two that didn't match the length of her absence. Window shopping is cardio, she joked once, sliding past me. I laughed because it sounded like something she would say, and because laughter was easier than doubt. Questions sprouted like weeds in the edges of my mind. Where exactly had she gone? Which stores? Who did she see? Nothing I asked was aggressive. It was the kind of casual curiosity that keeps couples aligned. But her answers lost their weight. Around. Here and there. I grabbed a bite. We talked about nothing, really. She delivered them with a gentle smile and a shrug that suggested my interest was endearing rather than necessary. Each non-answer evaporated as soon as it hit the air. Then I noticed the showers. Olivia always liked to feel put together, but even on days she said she'd browsed climate-controlled aisles, she beelined for the bathroom as soon as she returned. Water hammered through pipes while I stood in the kitchen and spun her shopping bag handles with a finger, hearing the echo of my own skepticism in the quiet. If I asked how her day was once she came out in a robe with damp hair, she breezed past specifics like they were potholes in a road she knew by heart. Her phone changed, too, its relationship to her and ours. It moved with her from room to room, flipped face down when I was near, and vibrated with a frequency that didn't sound like promotional emails or group chats about candle scents. I caught glimpses of her expression when a message rolled in, a private smile, small and bright, like something remembered rather than something received. She angled the screen in a way that protected her privacy more fiercely than she protected her recipes from stale air. I didn't snoop. That isn't the man I am. But I noticed. I noticed things for a living. There were other shifts, aesthetic ones. She started wearing foundation to buy milk, dresses to pick up dry cleaning. The perfume she'd once reserved for date nights became a signature hovering in our hallway by late afternoon. It wasn't merely vanity. I knew vanity when I saw it. This was intent. It was a woman caring who might see her, and it wasn't me because I was already home. Tuesday made the vague sharpen into something I could hold. I'd misplaced the spare key to my truck and figured I might have put it in Olivia's purse by mistake after unloading groceries. She'd left her bag on the bench by the front door. I didn't ransack it. I lifted the flap and didn't find a key. But there was a curled slip of paper near the top. One of those slim white receipts printed with tiny ink that fades too fast. Harbor Street Cafe, downtown. 2 cappuccinos, 2 lunch plates, mid-afternoon timestamp. Just under $50 before tip. At dinner, I mentioned it like I mentioned the weather, something that affects both of us even if neither of us can change it. How was downtown today? I asked while she slid a roasted carrot across her plate. She didn't startle. Olivia wasn't a woman who spooked easy. Ran into Sarah from college, she said. As if the encounter had been an errand she'd almost forgotten to run. We caught up over lunch. It was nice. I waited a beat for the rest, Sarah's last name, where their dorm had been, whether Sarah's 2 kids were the reason she looked tired at the reunion last winter. You don't have to drag a real story out of a person who wants to tell it. The details rush in like water when the dam opens. Olivia kept eating. The conversation sidestepped around me and moved on. That night in the quiet, I stared at our ceiling where passing headlights wrote shapes across plaster, and my mind did what it always does when something doesn't reconcile. It started matching the columns. Unusual time away, immediate showers, private smiles, guarded phone, lunches that beg a second cappuccino. I found payroll fraud with less. Numbers tell you what they are, not what you want them to be. Patterns don't lie just because lies are softer. I reached for my phone and typed private investigator near me, scrolling through a list of men and women with stoic headshots and promises to uncover what people hide. I saved one number. I didn't call. Not that night. There's a line between paranoia and prudence, and I wanted to know I wasn't stepping over it with steel-toed boots. 2 days passed while my better angel and my trained instincts argued like old rivals. One voice, the one that believes in vows and shared silverware and giving the person you chose the chance to speak, told me to sit Olivia down at our table and say plainly, I think something is wrong. Tell me what it is. The other voice, seasoned by spreadsheets and the way executives stall when you found the hole they hoped was invisible, reminded me that coming in hot without proof only teaches the other side what to hide next. You don't show your hand when you haven't even figured out what game you're sitting in. So I bought myself time. That's what you do when a story isn't adding up. You gather information without announcing that you're doing it. I started small, a kind of quiet audit of our life. On Wednesday, I asked if she wanted company on her errands. I've got to pick up a suit from the tailor. We could grab a sandwich after. I said it while putting on my shoes, an invitation embedded in an ordinary moment. She kissed my cheek and laughed like I'd said something charming and impossible. You'll be bored, Danny. I'm just returning a few things and wandering. Go to the gym. I'll be home before dinner. Wandering. I nodded like wandering was a destination. After she left, I made coffee and sat at the table where we paid bills and signed birthday cards. I logged into our joint credit account. I didn't memorize every charge. That would have been a kind of madness. I scanned for patterns, merchant names, timestamps, places that told a story. The line items were ordinary enough. Home store here, beauty supply there. A couple of department store returns and repurchases that could be normal if an outfit didn't fit how she imagined in the mirror. Nothing leaped out as an obvious red flag, which worried me more. Either there wasn't a flag, or she was careful where she planted it. After lunch, I took a different tack. I texted her a photo of a little ceramic lamp I'd seen in a boutique window near my office, something she'd normally love. I wrote, "You want me to grab this? Could be cute for the guest room." She hearted the message and said she was already across town. Strange, since the cafe on the receipt was downtown 2 days prior. But people move. People change plans. None of it was enough to convict a stranger in traffic court, let alone my wife in our kitchen. I told myself to be ashamed of thinking the way I was thinking. The feeling didn't stick. Olivia came home near 5, the sun slanting low. She breezed past the living room with 2 small bags that clinked like there were candles inside. Long day? I asked, leaning on the doorframe. Too long. She smiled like we were still us. You hungry? Always. The shower roared a minute later. When she reappeared in leggings and a soft sweater, she smelled like her favorite vanilla wood scent and wore the contented look of a person who had taken care of herself. She made stir-fry and served it in bowls just warm enough to comfort tired hands. She asked about my day, and I told her about a client who'd finally found a missing receipt from last quarter and acted like it was a personal triumph. We moved like partners who had practiced moving like partners. That night, I watched her sleep with the kind of attention that makes you feel disloyal. She'd tucked her hands beneath her cheek. A strand of hair had escaped and lay across her lips. She looked young, younger than 29, and a part of me felt like a burglar in my own house, stealing peace by entertaining suspicion. Another part of me, the pragmatic part, marked the difference between discomfort and denial. If I were auditing a department at work and found this pattern, I'd keep digging. Thursday, I went to work early and came home early. I thought I might surprise her somewhere along her route, and surprise myself by proving none of it mattered. She was already gone when I left. On my way back into town later, I passed the row of cafes near the historic district and saw the one on the receipt. Sunlight splashed across half the windows. I told myself I'd just drive by. People meet people, after all. People have lives that don't include their spouses all the time. Sometimes it is as harmless as a latte and a long story that doesn't need retelling. As I approached the corner, the light turned red. I stopped in front of those windows whether I meant to or not. I saw her. Olivia sat in the second booth from the back, posture straight, hair twisted into the casual knot she wore when she wanted to look like she'd tried without thinking about it. She wasn't alone. Across from her was a man I didn't know. He had the forgettable handsomeness of someone who has always been told he is handsome. Mid-30s, maybe. Shirt that looked ironed by someone who cared. Their faces tilted close in that way that doesn't require touching. He said something. She laughed with her head thrown back, mouth open. The laugh she used to spend on me when I got home early or told a joke that wasn't as funny as I thought. She reached reflexively for his wrist while she laughed, and then tucked her hand back around her cup like she'd caught herself. The light turned green. The car behind me honked. I drove on. I didn't pull over and crumble. I didn't swerve into the nearest lamppost with righteous rage. I drove 2 blocks, turned down a side street lined with oaks, and parked. I inhaled until the cold air burned a little and exhaled until it didn't. Anger is easy. Fury is a match, hot, bright, fast. I wanted something that could last long enough to be useful. I stayed there 5 minutes, 10, I don't know. I didn't want to become the man who runs in, flings a scene into an establishment where strangers will reach for their phones and record the fall of a marriage for entertainment. I also didn't want to be the man who goes home and pretends stir-fry and jokes about clients could stitch together what just broke. When I drove home, I took the long way. The house looked like itself when I pulled into the driveway. The porch light just beginning to glow, the hydrangeas along the walk going a deeper green as the evening set in. Inside, I did what I do when I need steadiness. I wiped down the counters, even though they weren't dirty. I made lists I didn't need. Things to remember, things to buy, things to throw away finally. I opened a drawer and closed it. I stood in the doorway of the spare bedroom and imagined it as a nursery because that had once been something we talked about, and the imagining hurt enough to make me step away. When Olivia came through the front door an hour later, she had a bouquet of white tulips wrapped in brown paper. They were on sale, she said, extending them with the kind of smile that preemptively defeats suspicion. She doesn't bring home flowers often. I took them like they were a peace offering I didn't yet know the reason for. She moved the way you move when you're trying to look like you have all the time in the world. Want a glass of wine? She asked. I don't remember whether I said yes or shook my head. The shower ran. She sang softly, an old habit when she was in a good mood. It was a melody from some playlist that had no name, just a feeling. I leaned against the sink and stared at my own reflection like he might tell me what to do. I put the tulips in water and thought about how gifts can be strategic. At work, when a vendor knows they've overbilled and hopes you won't notice, they take you to lunch first. They buy you a steak and tell you you're smart. People try to prepay grace. I don't mean that unkindly. It's just how it is. We ate leftovers in front of a show neither of us followed closely. When she laughed, I wondered whether she had laughed that day already. The thought wasn't fair. It was mine anyway. Sleep didn't come easy, so I got up and walked the house. The rooms felt the way rooms feel when you can sense the imprint of someone you love in them and also sense that imprint shifting under your feet. I opened the guest room closet under some pretense of checking the linens and found a shopping bag tucked behind a box of winter boots. Inside were two dresses with tags still on. They weren't scandalous. They were the kind of dresses that whisper as you walk and make people lean in. I put them back. I am not the jury. I am not the executioner. I am a man who understands that reactions carve roads you might have to walk for years. Friday morning, I went to the gym at 6 and pretended to care about the incline on the treadmill. On the way home, I pulled into a quiet parking lot and scrolled to the number I'd saved. I pressed call before I could talk myself out of who I might be becoming. The investigator introduced himself as Tom Hastings. His voice sounded like a back porch, steady, weathered, not interested in building drama. I can meet this afternoon, he said after I explained less than half of what I'd been holding. But before we do, a couple things. Don't accuse her. Don't alter your routine. Don't go through her phone if you haven't already. You want information that holds up if it needs to. I'm not building a case, I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I understood the lie inside them. I just need to know what I'm looking at. That's what we do. He gave me an address off a frontage road where a small office park squatted behind a row of pines, as if hiding on purpose. We set a time. When I walked back in the house, Olivia was at the table cutting squares of paper for a project she'd decided the spare room needed. Domestic life. Normal noises. She looked up and smiled. You're early. Client rescheduled, I said. It came out so easily that it scared me a little. People think lying is hard because of the big lies, the ones that break a life. It's the small ones that are too easy, the kind that skim across a surface without making a ripple. I grabbed a glass of water I didn't want and held it like a prop. What are you up to today? I asked. Nothing set in stone. She gathered the paper into a neat stack, a tidy metaphor I didn't need. Might swing by the home store. I've been thinking the guest room needs softer lamps. Good idea. I leaned down and kissed her hair. It smelled like the shampoo that has sat on the same shower shelf for 3 years. The familiar doesn't become unfamiliar all at once. It goes in pieces. I worked from my home office for 2 hours and pretended to care deeply about a vendor reconciliation that had been finished yesterday. When Olivia left, she called out that she'd be back by 5. I told her I loved her because I do. After the engine faded down the street, I sat for a long minute at my desk and stared at the framed photo from the day we moved in. We looked so young there. Boxes stacked like promises. Her head on my shoulder. My hand wrapped around a key. If you met those two people in a story, you'd believe everything would be fine. At 1:30, I parked outside Hastings Investigations, a place that looked like it had been something else a dozen times. A tax preparer in one era, a chiropractor in another. Tom met me in the lobby with a handshake that wasn't trying to communicate anything beyond itself. He led me into a modest room with 2 chairs, a small table, and a window that gave the trees outside the dignity of being seen. I don't need the bruised version, he said. Just the facts. You can be bruised, but I need your facts. I told him most of it. The schedule creep, the showers, the phone, the cafe, the man with the ironed shirt, the receipt. I left out my fear. It came along anyway. He nodded, asking clean questions the way surgeons ask about allergies. Do you know her passcode? No. Does she have a separate account or card? Not that I'm aware of. Does she have a set time she usually leaves? It varies. Any recent travel you didn't take together? No. He jotted notes that didn't pretend to be decisive. When I finished, he stacked his pen on the pad and folded his hands. If she's doing something, we'll know, he said. But you need to hear this. Sometimes we find friendship where a client expected betrayal, and sometimes we find a kind of betrayal that doesn't look like intimacy. Are you prepared for versions of the truth you didn't imagine? I stared at my palms a moment, at the faint white line where a box cutter had nicked me years ago. I'm prepared to stop guessing. He outlined what he'd do as though he'd done it so often the words could have spoken themselves. Discreet surveillance during the window, she's usually gone. A camera facing our driveway if I approved. Basic social checks that didn't cross the legal lines I had no intention of crossing anyway. He handed me a contract that acknowledged the reality of the world, non-refundable retainers, language about evidence that doesn't promise what it can't promise. I signed and felt like I'd joined a club nobody wants to belong to. When I left the office, the sky had shifted to that particular late afternoon light that makes everything look both softer and more honest. I sat in my car and thought about how much a grown man can do in a day: earn, drive, sign, decide, and how little control any of it gives you over another person's heart. I didn't drive by the cafe again. I drove home and squinted into the mirror and folded towels and opened our freezer and committed deeply to the mundane. Because ordinary tasks are a mercy when you're waiting for something that could break you. At 4:30, Olivia texted that she was heading home and asked if I needed anything picked up. I typed "we're low on olive oil" and deleted it. I typed "no thanks" and sent it. She walked in at 10 to 5 like she had told me she would. The predictability of the moment felt strategic and also like the most normal thing in the world. She put a small bag on the counter. Lamps. She cut open the cardboard and pulled out shades that were in fact softer than what we had. We carried them to the spare room together and placed them on the side tables and both said "better" at the same time. We laughed because sometimes jokes are just agreements said with more sound. Later, while we ate, she told me a story about a cashier who had been unnecessarily rude to the woman in front of her and how she'd made a point to be extra kind in response. It sounded like her. It sounded like the person I'd chosen. When she touched my wrist to emphasize her point, a flash of the cafe booth stung like a thorn I had forgotten was there. I didn't pull away. I also didn't relax. That night, when she fell asleep, I lay there with my eyes open and let the ceiling be a ceiling instead of a screen for my worries. There's a discipline to that, choosing not to narrate your own life when the voice in your head loves narration. I gave myself one rule: no more guesses. If there is a truth, it will show itself. The trick was not to teach it how to hide first. I reached for the phone on my nightstand and scrolled to Tom's number again. I didn't need to call. We had a plan. Still, I looked at his name like it was a hinge on a door I had walked through and could not walk back out of clean. The house hummed with its little sounds. The refrigerator, the soft tick of the hallway clock, the settling of wood that has been warm for most of a day and is letting go. I turned toward the woman who had become both the person I loved and the question I couldn't answer, and I felt my life tilting toward whatever it would be on the other side of knowing. You don't accuse without evidence. You don't start a fire when you're not sure where it will burn. You don't show your hand until you've learned what game is actually being played. I closed my eyes and practiced being still. Tomorrow would come carrying whatever it was carrying. I could meet it.